Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Finance and Admin Committee meeting Thursday, May 13th. It is 9:34 a.m. and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Connie, has roll call been taken?
Through you, Chair, to committee, yes, roll call has been taken.
Thank you so much. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? I see none. Can I get an adoption of minutes of the previous meeting held on April 15th, 2021, please? Moved by Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor Hunt. Any errors or omissions? I see none. All in favor? Perfect. We have no delegations, so at this time I'm going to pass this over to our CAO for his departmental report. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to committee. Item number one, public COVID communication. So really just an update on the crisis communications team's role in social messaging regarding the stay the course messaging for COVID, essentially the lockdown order. So that's the update there, and messaging regarding emergency preparedness, testing, vaccines, and mental health supports continue to be posted. So if I may, Chair, I'll go to item number two.
Yes, please.
So we received an audit from the province of Ontario on our accessibility plans, and we are now moving forward with an implementation plan, and we'll bring that forward to committee for approval probably in August. We've essentially have two components to it. Mike Blackmore will be looking and working with our IT folks on our internet site to make sure that we become more compliant. And then Rose is looking after our documents as it relates to transparency and making sure that those documents resulting from council and committees get posted. And we're working through an approach again with IT to make sure that they get posted electronically to make sure the public has access to those, and we meet the province of Ontario's accessibility guidelines. To be quite frank with committee, when this whole accessibility issue started, I was under the, I guess, the understanding that we would change some fonts and we would maybe reformat some of our documents, but it is turning out to be far more complex than I had originally imagined. So we're taking some time to make sure we do it right, and then we'll bring back our plan to committee. Item number three, Chair, letter from the Board of Health regarding funding requirements for 2021. That letter goes back to an original letter that the warden had sent as directed by council in January of 2021 regarding the financial estimates for Renfrew County District Health Unit. So attached is their response to that. Would you like me to move on to resolutions, Chair?
Why don't let's deal with information first, because I think that resolution, this first one's going to take some talking out, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
All right. So information number one, committee about COVID-19 communication. Warden.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to Paul. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I know we've tried to, do positive communication and congratulating people for doing everything they can. I don't have an answer to my suggestion, but I'm wondering if there's some way that we can create some incentives for people to do the right thing. In particular, if next week the province expands the lockdown till June. I don't know what it is, but just something that people can maybe have a little bit of fun with, but still, as a result, they're doing the right thing. Just a thought.
Okay.
Well, and in our meeting with, to your point, Warden, in our meeting with Dr. Cushman, I mean, it's, do you want to give up May 2 for so you can have Canada Day? Looking forward, if we don't get a handle on these numbers, we're not going to have a summer. Any ideas, Paul?
Outside of a sale at the LCBO, Chair, I have nothing further to offer.
You might have something there.
Let's exacerbate the already addiction issue we've got going on in the county. Anything further on number 1? All right. Number 2, the desk audit. Councillor Donahue, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Morrill. So I do not recall whether it was at our last finance admin or county council or the one prior in March, whether there was an external consultant engaged that I think the initiative at stage 1 was to see if staff could be provided the expertise. And if not, then perhaps that company might be engaged. What's the status of that?
Thank you, Chair. Through to Councillor Donahue. We have engaged a consultant, but I will turn it over to Ms. Gruntz, who will outline the training staff has been provided and what the specific steps we are taking.
Thank you.
Through you,
Sounds good.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
We've had our first training in Word. This was to enable us to set up our templates. Our next training session is next week on the 19th and 20th. So hopefully after that, we will be able to go back and remediate all of our documents.
Rose, if I may, we are also engaged Able Docs to do some of that work for us, possibly.
Yes, well, they're doing the training. Sorry, Madam Warden, through you. They're doing the training for us. And then after we have the training and we see how long it'll take us to remediate these documents, I'll set up a sort of a timeline to have the admins put them on the website.
I couldn't think of the name of the company. Thanks for that, Paul. Yes, Councillor Donahue.
Just to follow up, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you through you to Ms. Gruntz. I'm assuming that the second part of that conversation was with respect to legacy documents, that is, those documents that have already been generated, but the expectation is that staff on a going forward basis, these will be accessible documents when they are first created. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Warden, yes, that's correct. So we will be going back and starting with 2021, and then probably going back to 2020.
All right, thank you.
I'm not the warden anymore, just to be clear.
Just back when you were, I apologize both to you, Chair, and to the warden.
I just sent Debbie a chat saying they'll get it in your 3rd year. I think it's my voice, warden. I think they associate my voice with being the warden.
Well, you do command the attention, that I will absolutely give you that. That's fine. I don't care what you call me.
She's such a good sport. Okay, anything further on to seeing none. All right, number 3, the letter from the Board of Health. Yeah, Councillor Peckett.
Thank you, Chair. I believe this, I stand to be corrected, as the 2nd year in a row that there's been a request for a 10% increase in expenditures for the Board of Health. I don't know I can't remember what the outcome of last year's or the one before, whether we just went ahead and paid. And thus my question for this is, are we just going to go ahead and pay another 10%? And is this going to continue on year after year? I don't, personally, I don't think it's fair that the county itself had to go through multiple changes and altering staff around and trying to cut back on costs and expenditures. And the Board of Health just keeps asking for another 10% each year. And my suggestion would be that the Board of Health be given increases the same as the county increases its tax levy to all of Renfrew County. Thank you.
Thank you. Because I'm new to the Board of Health, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this to Councillor Donahue because he sat on the Board of Health, last year and this year. So thanks for that. Councillor Donahue, you want to try and answer this?
Thank you, Madam Warden. In fact, my first year on the board, I think Moses was still on the board. I have to go back a couple of years. Perhaps committee will recall the turmoil that was created in Ontario as the then new government moved quickly to put their imprint on the health sector. So initially, the plan was to roll the 36, perhaps 34 public health units, I think into 10. Likewise, the notion was floated of consolidating what I believe were 44 land ambulance services into 10. But on public health, the funding formula for quite some time, I think going back almost to the turn of the century, or since the turn of the century, has been a 75-25 split. That is, the province has been funding 75% of the costs and municipalities have been funding 25%. Just to complicate matters a little bit further, probably about 10% of the budget of public health was 100% funded by the province. So in 2019, the province announced that that funding formula was going to change. And now the cost share was going to be split 70-30 rather than 75-25. In addition, almost all of the 100% funded, provincially funded programs were now going to also be cost shared with municipalities. And incidentally, to Councillor Peckett's comments, this of course includes also the City of Pembroke and the Township of South Algonquin. Of course, on a population basis, the municipal funding component, I believe 86.4% of it is the County of Renfrew. In any event, that change from the 75-25 to 70-30 alone was the entire impetus of the 10% increase for the 2020 fiscal year, both ours and public health. And in fact, it was substantially more than 10%. But in that first year, the province had essentially indemnified to the tune of 90% any of the cost change. That is to say, or for more clarity, perhaps through you, Madam Chair, any increase that was derived simply from the changed funding share split, the province would pick up 90% of that change. So that is, Councillor Peckett is absolutely correct. For the 2020 year, it was a 10% change, bearing in mind that that was ostensibly, that year putatively was a one-off year, and then the following year we were going to be exposed to the full increased expense off of the property tax levy. Skipping ahead to this year, the province once again has announced on a one-time basis that they would indemnify municipalities from any of the increased expense due simply to the change in the funding share split. So where I can assure this committee is that in 2020, the budget for Renfrew County District Health Unit was unchanged from 2019. So the entirety of the 10% increase was simply due to the provinces deciding unilaterally and with no consultation to move to the new funding share. So that is before us simply because of that decision of the province to download those extra costs onto municipalities. So once again, the increase in 2021, I think more precisely, was 8.5%. But of course, given the county's determination of a 2.5% levy, that raised the question that ultimately prompted the letter from the warden and generated this response. But once again, the property tax levy has been sheltered from the actual increase that is going to come from the municipal cost share of public health. And that is entirely due to the change in the funding share. So certainly, I think it is, I am sympathetic and empathetic and in complete agreement with Councillor Peckett that I think that this is unacceptable. The last time something like this was done was just before SARS and Walkerton. I think it is short-sighted, yet I think it's imperative to understand that the genesis of this was with the province of Ontario's decision and not public health.
Thank you for that, Councillor Donahue. And I was actually going to correct as well and say it was 8.5%. It's still unacceptable. I mean, it's ridiculous, but does that answer your question, Councillor Peckett?
Yes, thank you. Just better understanding now, thanks to Councillor Donahue. Hoping that in future, after the pandemic is over, that things will change back a little bit, where if everybody else is going to be held to 2 or 3% increases and everything, I think it should be the same across the board. Thank you very much for that information.
Yeah, I knew that Councillor Donahue was definitely the better one to explain what had gone on in 2020, just for the sheer fact that I wasn't there. Councillor Sweet, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I could take you back a little bit further back than what Councillor Donahue has talked about. It goes back to 2018 when the province, the government at the time, instituted a provincial municipal fiscal review, of which I sat on the table. At the end of the day, there was a substantial upload to the province from the property tax onto the income tax, one of which is the health unit, the other was land ambulance, etc. There was a number of them there, social services, etc. And I remind you, members of committee, that represented about $2 billion over the 10-year period, and it ended in 2018. The government of the day was quite comfortable with this initiative, but the opposition at the time were fiercely opposed to this type of upload. And I did indicate at the time that we should be very careful and cautious and be very cognizant of the fact that the current government that's in place did not like the uploads that were made by that fiscal review. And in fact, they thought there was a better way of doing it. And privately talking to some members, including the leader at that time of the opposition, that if he managed to be in power, he would take a step towards reversing or taking a look at that. And I think what Councillor Donahue is talking about is the actual reality of what they talked about back in 2009, 2010, and we're seeing that today. And again, I'll caution that some of the reversals of the achievements that were made back then to take it off of the property tax and put it onto the income tax, I think we have to be very cognizant of that and be careful and watch closely as the government moves forward through this particular process. So it goes back to 2008, some of the situations that we're seeing, and one of them was public health.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sweet. Is there anything further on number 3? Warden.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going to ask perhaps you and Councillor Donahue and Councillor Regular and Councillor Emo at your next Board of Health meeting. The last sentence of Chair Aiken's letter says, I would welcome the opportunity to discuss improved communication strategies going forward. I would ask that you perhaps, bring that under new business and just find out for us what that is that she's wanting to do. Because I'm not sure, it doesn't seem to be a to me, that letter was a financial issue, not a communication issue. But if you could just sort of flesh that out for us and bring back some information, that would be of benefit.
Consider it done. We can make that happen. Councillor Brose.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say I do agree that this was the letter was about a financial issue, and I think communication from the county has been very, very clear. Had it not been for Councillor Donahue's explanation on the increases I wouldn't have gotten that out of the response letter from the health unit. So I do appreciate the further clarification, and if anything, maybe the communication coming from the health unit, at least in my opinion, could be a little more detailed.
I think Michael and I can take that back on the 25th. Yes, Councillor Donahue.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I think that I'm trying to go back even to the documents I think that were included, I believe, with the letter at the time of the Board of Health deciding on its requirements for the ensuing year, and that I believe Mr. Foss can confirm. I believe we received that in December. We may have reviewed it at Finance and Administration in January. The unfortunate thing is there was just the last of 5 pages that were the essentially the summary of how that levy requirement was established. And I believe all that page had done at that time was simply articulated the, as I said, 84.6 or 86.4, that is the County of Renfrew's portion, and I believe it is something on the order of 12 point something percent is the City of Pembroke, and I think it's like 1.14 is the component that the Township of South Algonquin is responsible for. So I think that in this follow-up letter, I think that the full 5 pages that were presented to the Board of Health were also included, and I think that just something like that, it occurred to me, I recall that Councillor Doncaster had noted, I think when we first saw that had provided significant more context to how the levy requirement had been. So I think just those things, but certainly as the chair has indicated, this can definitely be brought forward once again at Board of Health.
And thank you for that. I'm sort of recall, I might have up the communication issue, Warden, because we hadn't gotten minutes, which really muddied the waters. Remember, we got like, I think we got 6 or 7 meeting minutes all at once in a health committee meeting, and the letter had been sent prior to those minutes being released. So that's where I think maybe I might have muddied the waters with communication, but yeah, Michael and I can take that back. Thank you. All right, anything further on 3? Seeing none, we're going to move to resolutions. Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'll start with the recommendation.
Yes, please.
That the Finance and Administration Committee recommend to County Council that the following conditions be permitted for electronic participation in meetings, and that the procedural bylaw be revised to include these conditions.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Hunt, seconded by Councillor Peckett. All right, discussion.
Chair, if I may, would you like me to go through the changes?
Sure, because as I stated, you did a beautiful job of doing them in red, and I printed it in black and white. So yes, that would be very helpful, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to be clear, it was most certainly a team effort between Rose and I. So Rose deserves lots of the credit on this one as well. So
well, thank you, Rose.
At the last council meeting, we discussed a preamble that would provide some intent and clarity as to the purposes of this section of the procedural bylaw. So I'd like to start by reading that preamble to members of committee, so we can get a flavor for again, the intent of this section. So members of council recognize the value of electronic meetings. However, it is the will of council that electronic attendance at meetings of committee and county council be permitted under specific conditions as outlined in this section of the procedural bylaw. Further, it is the will of council that the majority of members of council, quorum, are present in person in accordance with section 7, place of meeting, contained in this procedural bylaw. Council also recognizes that provisions have been established through bylaw 113-18, a bylaw to provide for the appointment of alternate members to council. Should a member of council be unable to participate in meetings of committee or county council due to unforeseen circumstances such as illness. So again, the intent there is to establish those parameters, and I hope it encapsulates some of the discussion that had occurred at county council. So I will run through the first piece of it, that we first, by striking out the first two sections of the, we start by including those conditions under which members of council can participate. So A, in your report, councils are permitted to participate in a meeting remotely via electronic video conferencing, very specific wording there, because then that would rule out teleconferencing. I think we need to be specific in the technology that we're allowing, so it would permit for consistency. So the first A is in a declared emergency as defined by the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. And so that's quite clear. So should the municipality declare an emergency, or the province of Ontario under that legislation, we would move to electronic meetings, very much like we are in right now. B, councils are permitted to participate in a meeting remotely via electronic video conferencing in the event of a significant weather event. So as you know, it's January, February, our public works folks declare a local significant weather event. That would be the same at the local municipalities. So Chair, should the public works folks at Bonnechere Valley declare a significant weather event for your community, we would ask that you call the clerk or the presiding officer. We've declared a significant weather event. I would like to participate remotely. We would send you the meeting link to do that. Moving to C, councils are permitted to participate in a meeting remotely via electronic video conferencing means in the event of an illness or injury with consent of the presiding officer or the clerk. This is the challenging one for us. Who am I? And again, this was put in here as a result of the conversation we had at county council. But the presiding officer, the warden, or the chair of the committee, or myself as clerk, or Rose as deputy clerk, you know, my comfort level is not quite there in terms of saying, you have a cold, yeah, that's fine, you can participate. So this is the one where I think most of the discussion will occur on. And so, you know, I'll leave it at that. It's a really tough one to police. It will be the honor system. And it goes back to the preamble saying, depending on how ill you are, maybe you should invoke the alternate member bylaw and establish that. So, you know, there's those varying degrees of illness, and how it would come into play would be an issue. So that would be the challenge with that one. Councils are permitted to participate in a meeting remotely via electronic video conferencing means who have been duly appointed to an external advisory board like AMO, FCM, Roma. So should, you know, Councillor Doncaster be away at a meeting, wherever, Halifax, Quebec City, and want to participate remotely, that would be permitted. We would ask for notification to the clerk and the presiding officer. When moving to E though, it does identify that all councillors participating remotely shall have the same rights and responsibilities as if they were physical attendance. I think the section F now with respect to where they are located is off the table. I don't think we need to state it, so we've deleted it, striked it out. The rest remains the same, except for when I move to J, a member shall inform the presiding officer and the clerk should they turn their video off, but continue to be present. Again, this is an issue of quorum for us. And how do we know someone has left the room or hasn't left the room? Just as the chair has done today, the chair informs us when she's having internet connectivity issues and says, I'm turning off my video, but I'm still here. That's a process we would like to instill in the procedural bylaw. I think that's important for us to be able to manage quorum and who is and who is not at the meeting. One small change to section N in terms of the absence of the chair, the vice chair will assume the position of chair for the remainder of the meeting, should something happen. So I believe, Chair, that summarizes the changes we've made to that, to the procedural bylaw to address the issues of electronic meeting participation. Now, Rose did have an opportunity to speak to Fred Dean, and Chair, with your indulgence, I would ask Rose just to convey the gist of that conversation.
Yeah, that would be great.
Madam Warden, through you to the committee. Prior to COVID and the declared emergency, the Municipal Act did include a section on electronic participation. However, it did not count the members participating electronically in quorum, and you couldn't participate in closed meetings. So Mr. Dean feels that changing the parameters now is premature, as he feels that the Municipal Act will likely change once we're out of the declared emergency.
Oh, interesting.
If I may, Chair, my preference would be to go with something like we've just talked about right now, because what he's suggesting is we essentially go back to no electronic meeting provision and back to what our old procedural bylaw said and back to the original provisions of the Municipal Act. So I respect his opinion, and we utilize Fred quite a bit just to bounce ideas off of. But in this particular case, I would actually recommend to committee and council that we continue to move forward with what is in front of committee today.
I agree with you. And, when we're talking about, so we're going to re-letter these then if we took out F, correct? Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, we would reformat it and re-letter it. In fact, we would format it. And again, Councillor Donahue did point out the formatting. We need to realign the formatting to be consistent throughout the entire procedural bylaw. And we would do that in advance of it going to County Council Chair.
Sounds perfect. So I think this one, the J, if we have to turn off our video, I think, Councillor Bros warned us at the beginning of the meeting, he might have to turn his off. He had connectivity problems yesterday, apparently. I warned at the beginning, or I can send in chat, my internet's unstable, but I think that's a very important bullet point in this. But what I'll do is I think I'm going to do these one by one. So I'll ask for comments, questions on the preamble. Okay, I see none. So I'll go to A. B. C. Yes, Warden Robinson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not comfortable with this at all. I don't think that any of us want to be put in the spot of deciding who's ill enough to stay at home and who isn't. I just don't understand. I'm really not in support of doing electronic means because you're ill. I think if you're ill, you're ill. It's unfortunate, but that's the position I would take. As well as, I know I'm going to sneak in D here just for a second, because the last part says at the discretion of the presiding officer and the clerk. Again, I don't think that discretion should be a given.
Okay.
Oh, you're right. Now that I read it over, yeah. Okay, so with regards to C, I mean, Paul said it, right? We're on the honor system. If you have a cold, that's a one-off meeting. So I can't go to F&A because I've got a terrible cold. And I asked Councillor Hunt to take over chairing the meeting. That's a finite amount of time. I'm thinking more in line of when I broke my ankle and Dave had to drive me to County Council. Like that's, you know, I'm wearing a boot, but I can't drive, or a cast, and I can't drive. I'm thinking more in terms of that kind of thing. That's more of a, you know, I was in a cast for 6 weeks. But I'll open it up for other discussion. Councillor Brose.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do agree with the warden. I can't support this. I think it puts too much responsibility on staff to determine who could be allowed to attend a meeting electronically and who couldn't. I mean, if we continue with our YouTube presentations and recordings, I mean, anybody could review what's going on if they can't attend. But I don't believe they should have that, should be counted towards quorum. And, you know, they have that ability to appoint somebody in their absence. So I'm not comfortable at all with C. Thanks.
Anything further on C? Councillor Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's certainly not my intent at this point to terminate discussion. Certainly this committee is much aware of my position on most of these, but I anticipate that this is going to be done again at County Council. I think anything that I would say today would simply be redundant and a waste. I would, by the way, be seeking that this be severed and dealt with, considered separately. And just in the wording on C itself, this already exists somewhere in the procedural and has never sat well with me. There is certainly a logical inconsistency in C, is because the presiding officer is the person that sits over the meeting. There cannot be a presiding officer until the meeting has started, so we cannot decide whether someone could attend virtually until the meeting is ultimately started. If it is the warden, that's fine. If it is the chair, that's fine. Those positions don't change, but the presiding officer is someone only that presides over a meeting. So there was a logical inconsistency there. The other thing that I have more concern with is and this is not directed at this warden or any other warden, but this committee is certainly aware of my position vis-a-vis the eligibility. If I sit in the warden's chair, I might take a different approach to whether whether I would give consent or not. It seems to me improper that the warden or staff, perhaps even more so staff, seem to have that decision-making authority, even when presiding, whether it is in this meeting, Madam Chair, yourself, or whether it is a council meeting and it is the warden. Any ruling that the warden may make on a point of order, perhaps, is subject to appeal to the body. So ultimately, there is little power vested directly in the warden throughout, that I have issues with that, and it has nothing to do with the current occupant or any former occupants. But I think that what it creates is that it is going to be dependent on the outlook of the person sitting in the chair, and I think that that's problematic. And that's there are no other issues here that I'm going to address at this forum because it would be a waste of time. But if we could sever this, and I would. If it's out of order, I'll do it afterwards. I'll just hold that in abeyance for now.
Well, go ahead. You want to make?
I'll move that it be severed from the report then.
Want to get a seconder to sever this item from the report? Second by the warden. All in favor? All right, we will sever this. I kind of agree with Councillor Donahue. I'm happy that we're sending this to County Council because I think that once again, we discussed this last month, that this needs to be an entire county decision, not the unilateral decision of FNA on wording, etc. So with that, is there anything further on this item? Warden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if we could put a bullet in that states that if you're participating electronically and you leave the meeting, that you inform whether or not it's the chair of the meeting or someone, because when you have a lot of faces on the screen and some of them are staff and some of them are council or committee members, when you lose one person, you don't necessarily notice that, and you can actually lose quorum. You know, there's been times when I've been involved in committee meetings just realize that, you know, there's a member has left. And I'll often say to Rose, do you know, did they say they were leaving? Sometimes people do, and sometimes people forget. So I think if we put it in there, then the onus is on folks to say, I'm leaving.
Yeah, agreed. Paul?
Chair, if I may, if we could expand J to include that.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate place to put it.
Chair, just another, and I understand this item has been severed and there'll be further debate, but I would propose that before going to county council, I would change presiding officer language to chair and warden as outlined in the procedural bylaw definitions. I don't disagree with Councillor Donohue's interpretation of presiding officer. They are not the same. So it should say chair or warden, and I can make those changes.
That would be great. Yes, Councilman.
Did you say Councillor Hunt?
I did.
Does Al address the warden's concern about leaving the meeting?
I believe
Yes,
it does. It does.
That's
Thank you.
interesting because I was looking for it and couldn't find it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it does. You are correct, sir. All right, so see, and Glenn just did it as well. That chat feature works very well to let us know that your internet is unstable. You don't even have to interrupt the meeting to let people know that you're leaving or that you're having connectivity problems. So I hope everybody uses that. Okay, we're gonna move off this item and we'll go to number 5, and then we'll vote on it, and then we'll come back to number 4.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 5 of the report is the proposed list of AMO delegations for this year with a recommendation. And if I may, Chair, I'll read the recommendation.
Yes, please.
That the Finance and Administration Committee recommends that County Council approve the submission of delegation requests for the AMO virtual conference by the deadline of June 4th, 2021, with the appropriate ministers as follows: Minister of Long-Term Care, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the topic would be the seniors housing strategy and the issues associated with that in the County of Renfrew. The second proposed delegation would be Premier, Minister of Health, Minister of Long-Term Care, and the topic would be long-term care, and we left it general, but I'm assuming it's long-term care reforms and funding for long-term care facilities within the County of Renfrew, and our concerns that are being raised with respect to implementation of things like 4 hours of care, those issues. Item number 3, Chair, proposed delegation with the Premier, Parliamentary Assistant to the Premier Will Boma, Minister of Health, Minister of Long-Term Care, and that topic would be virtual healthcare, specifically the Renfrew County and Virtual Triage Assessment Center, and the continuation of funding for that program and initiative post-COVID. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Brose, second by Councillor Hunt. Discussion. Warden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering through you to Paul, whether or not we should be trying to also have a conversation about OHT governance.
Oh,
I would be happy to add that to the list, ma'am, as item number 4. And what we would do is propose that that would be Premier, Minister of Health.
good catch, Warden. So are the mover and seconder happy with a friendly amendment, just adding number 4? Yes, thank you. All right, I've got Councillor Hunt and then Councillor Doncaster, please.
Thank you. Through you, I'm wondering, should there be a delegation on internet and the gig project? or perhaps maybe, I don't know if the warden could expand that. Look, I think the message needs to be out there, but is something being done through another avenue? Or should we?
Generally, that goes through the EOWC. Go ahead, Warden.
Yes, thank you. So through you, Councillor Hunt, it will definitely be through the EOWC and EORN. It is one of the priorities. My suspicion, however, is that by the time AMO comes around in August, we will know where some of that funding is going from the province and the feds. The feeling is that they will be making a decision about where they're going to fund broadband expansion in the next couple of months. But I've turned to Mr. Morrow in case I've misinterpreted the signs.
Yes, Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the warden hit the nail on the head. And just to reassure Councillor Hunt that it is one of the warden's, the EOWC's priorities. It will be part of our multi-ministerial delegation topics for discussion. In fact, this Friday, the warden will be speaking to it as the chair with other wardens at a meeting with all the Eastern Ontario members of Parliament. So it still has a significant amount of status associated with it through the EOWC. But again, the warden, I think, is very astute in her comments in that we suspect there will be a decision coming out of Ministry of Infrastructure. We know that they have created a department out of the Ministry of Infrastructure with an ABM of broadband. So we anticipate there will be some announcements. So the warden's bang on.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Doncaster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if on number 3, along with VTAC, if there was consideration given to the virtual family health team.
Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The virtual family health team is actually really being espoused specific to the Petawawa Centennial Health Team and being led by Dr. Fitzsimons. Now, while we have endorsed it through a letter and through Health Committee, VTAC has been more front and center for us and has been specific to a much larger issue with respect to those members of our community that do not have a primary care physician. So in staff developing these and making the recommendation, our priority was to go to the biggest issue that would have the greatest impact on our community in making this delegation. And again, open to the change, but that was our rationale, knowing that VTAC is critical to our community post-pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Warden.
Thank you, Chair. And also just to add to Mr. Morrow's comments that Chief Nolan yesterday gave us some disturbing news around opioid overdoses and what's happening there. And again, that is, that's a population that can also be served through VTAC. So there's, the potential for VTAC to be a very strong and influential partner in healthcare in Renfrew County and actually anywhere continues to grow. So, it's an opportunity for us to try to solidify some funding going forward and hopefully down the road. And I would say that's what the position would be of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus is to see VTAC duplicated throughout Eastern Ontario.
Yeah, that was a grim health committee meeting yesterday, but great discussion. I mean, we spent a lot of time on it. So, all right, is there anything further on 5? I do have a mover and seconder with the friendly amendment of adding number 4. So all in favor? Thank you. The report as a whole except number 4. Can I get a mover and seconder to adopt, please? Moved by Councillor Peckett, second by Councillor Hunt. All in favor? All right, and we will go back to number 4. Do we want to have any more discussion or do we want to... I have a mover and seconder, correct, Paul?
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So if there's no other discussion, then I'll call for the vote.
Recorded, please, Madam Chair. I apologize.
Sorry, Councillor Donahue.
Recorded. please.
Oh, recorded vote? Yes, okay, yeah, yes, Paul?
Just before we do the recorded vote, and I'll give Jeff a second to get his spreadsheet up as well. Now, my question to the committee would be, as we went through this, I've heard some comments, and one of them was with respect to the change in language with respect to presiding officer versus chair, and I'm wondering if committee would be opposed to me making that change between now and it coming to county council.
I would be fine with that, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads.
And
Yes.
Oh, did you say Warden?
Yes.
Okay, sorry,
Oh,
you're
I'm
you're
sorry,
cutting
what's-
out a little bit, but it's okay.
Okay.
I'm wondering what we're voting on.
I'm still here.
Can you tell me what the motion is that we're voting on? Because are we recommending to county council these changes? Because I did get the sense that most of us really want to see this just forwarded to county council for discussion as opposed to recommending the changes. I mean, I could be mistaken.
I agree with you. I think that we forward it to county council, not necessarily as a recommendation of this committee. I think that all 17 of us need to weigh in on this.
Absolutely.
Yes, Councillor Doncaster.
I'm double clicking here. Okay, but procedurally,
Yeah.
that's one of the mandates of the standing committees is to make recommendations to county council. If we're going to continue on down this road, why do we have committees? Why doesn't everything go to county council, other than the fact that the meeting would be 48 hours long? You know, I think it's important that we utilize the system that we have of standing committees. I get it that, you know, this is something that all of county council has the right to weigh in on, which they will have when it comes to county council, whether we forward it or it's a recommendation. I think it's this committee's responsibility to make a recommendation to county council.
I just want everybody to have the opportunity to weigh in properly. And I'm afraid that this recommendation is going to die on the floor. Yes, Warden.
That was going to be my comment. If as a committee, we're not prepared to make we don't want these recommendations to go forward, then county council never has an opportunity to take a stab at it.
Councillor Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll bring up the comments that I had made a couple of meetings ago vis-a-vis the Algonquin Trail and the authority of council at the point, and I do not disagree with Councillor Doncaster's assessment on the role of committees, but in this instance, it does seem to be the will of this committee to advance this to county council without a recommendation, because a recommendation is a weighting on it. I don't know if that is persuasive to other members of council or not. Certainly from other committees, when I'm sitting at county council and a recommendation comes forward, that does, in my estimation, provide some weighting to it. It certainly in my decision-making framework, it does. Just as an example, I would suggest that not frequently, but not unheard of, often our Parliament of Canada makes referral to the Supreme Court of Canada before actually enacting legislation, which is to get an opinion on what the nature is. So I do not think that it is beyond the pale or ultra vires of this committee or any other to advance an issue to county council without a recommendation, because that unto itself, in my estimation, is a recommendation, i.e. that there is not consensus on these issues, but it is of substantive importance that county council should engage in it nonetheless and not wither at committee.
And that's my concern, is that this is going to die on the vine and it won't get to county council. So Paul, procedurally, what do I do now?
Okay, so you guys are most certainly challenging me today. We have a duly moved and second seconded motion on the floor. I believe we need to take action on that. Should the motion be defeated, then we would need a second motion from the committee directing that the motion be brought forward to County Council for consideration. I'm throwing that out there. Councillor Donahue, I'm wondering if you have some comments on that process.
If I might, Mr. Morrow is not incorrect, but there is another option that is entirely up to the mover and seconder. There is the option to withdraw the motion. The motion now is in possession of this body. It has been duly moved and seconded, as you have noted, as the chair has noted. It would be the body that would have to consent to it being withdrawn, but the mover and the seconder can withdraw it if they are persuaded that the recommendation would be better worded as we are forwarding this and not recommending. If that were the case, then I would not be seeking a recorded vote and I could support forwarding this. The reason I am seeking a recorded vote is because I cannot endorse a recommendation on this.
All right, so who were my mover and seconder? I think it was James and Brian, is that correct?
Connie, do you have the mover and seconder?
Yes, I do. Through you, Chair. The mover was Councillor Hunt, and it was seconded by Councillor Peckett.
Ah, okay. So I will throw this out to Councillor Hunt and Councillor Peckett.
To withdraw.
Excellent. Councillor Peckett?
Withdraw, please.
Thank you. Okay, so now I can call for the vote. I need a mover and seconder making this a forward, correct?
Yes, ma'am, you do.
For a mover and seconder to forward this to County Council. Moved by Councillor Donahue, seconded by Councillor Sweet. Discussion.
Councillor Donahue, ma'am, is not moving it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Donahue.
I am prepared to do so. What I would suggest, though, Mr. Moore, I'll defer to you on this. A motion was made, seconded, it was in possession of the body. There's a motion to withdraw, a seconder to withdraw. Does that not need to be voted on by the body?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
my apologies.
Yep.
I got ahead of myself. All right, so we're voting on withdrawal of the recommendation. All in favor? All right, now I have a mover and seconder, Councillor Donahue and Councillor Sweet, forward this item to County Council without a recommendation. Discussion.
If I might, just for precision, Madam Chair, I am moving that the recommendation be amended, that the Finance and Administration Committee forward to County Council so that it is a motion to amend the recommendation.
I'm not sure you need to amend it. I'm not clear on that, Chair. Why it would be amended. The motion was withdrawn.
The motion is to forward it to County Council. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I will defer.
Warden?
I'm sort of with Councillor Donahue in this, that I think we need to be clear what the wording of our motion. So I'm just looking at what's sitting there now, and I would suggest that we say that the Finance Administration Committee forward to County Council the following conditions for considerate to be considered, oh my good God, that Finance Administration Committee forward to County Council the following conditions to be considered, as opposed to be permitted as well, because I think that's
Yes, Paul?
I'm wondering, not to make this even more confusing, but Chair, I'm wondering if the motion to forward to County Council for consideration needs to refer to the motion or recommendation that was in the report to the Finance and Administration Committee, that recommendation and the proposed changes be forwarded to County Council for consideration.
Are the mover and seconder okay with that? Councillor Donahue and Councillor Sweet?
Sure. I just wanted to go to County Council for an in-depth discussion is really what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah,
that's exactly where I was going, Councillor Sweet. Warden?
I'm just way too wordy right now, so what Paul said sounds great to me.
You just have to go ditto. All right, so everybody understands the motion on the floor now to forward this item to County Council. All in favor? All right. Now, with that, we are done with Paul's report. It is in fact 10:34. Does everybody want a stretch break? Before we, yeah, okay, I'm getting some nods there before we move on. So why don't we reconvene at 10:45?
Madam Chair, we have an administration report.
I thought we did.
We just did that last motion on item number 4.
I called for a vote on the report as a whole before we went on to 3.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry you did.
Sorry, yeah. I thought I was doing okay. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Foss with his departmental report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the Finance and Administration Committee. My report begins on page number 10 under information items. Item number 1 is council remuneration. That statement is provided to you up to March the 31st, so the first quarterly report. And just a comment about the revisions that we had made during budget 2021, where we made some reductions to the expenditure targets within the council department. And then we have revised that particular chart to simply indicate that council convention expenses then per member at $1,875. And of course, we are anticipating continued virtual council and webinar and further convention opportunities for members. Item number 2 is the treasurer's report to March the 31st. So the first quarterly report being issued to you for the General Revenue Fund, Bonnechere Manor, Miramichi Lodge, Public Works, and as well the Renfrew County Housing Corporation. Those statements primarily have been reviewed at each of the other committee meetings during this week as well. Item number 3 then, also on a quarterly basis, as has been the practice for corporate services for a number of years, we have been bringing forward some documentation around key performance indicators. We started this probably 5 or 6 years ago now, 2015 or 2016, bringing these forward to council. The one new addition I'll draw your attention to is the one for the Human Resources Department. Most of the other KPIs have been fairly well used by each of the departments, but the Human Resources Department has created a number of initial KPIs, and so that project, if you will continue to be promoted within the HR department, and we can expect that perhaps there will add to some of the key performance indicators for that department as well. Item number 4 within the Provincial Offences Administration Department is really an update on sort of our backlog information, if you will, and this was an issue that we raised with this committee last month. What we're attempting to do with this particular chart is to give you some sense of the number of courts that were originally scheduled for each one of our monthly periods, the number of courts that have been canceled because all of our satellite courts essentially have been canceled. So Renfrew, Deep River, as well as Killaloe courts are all canceled, giving you some sense on a monthly basis of the number of charges that we have in backlog currently for Part 1 offenses, as well as for the Part 3 new charges and backlog of offenses in Part 3 charges, and then the total backlog of charges that staff are attempting to deal with. So from March until April, the backlog in charges grew from just over 900 to 1,239. So we've increased about 320 charges. Again, this trend will continue unless we begin to really open up the number of court dates that are available to us somewhere back to the original calendar or the original approved schedule. And of course, we have indicated to you the number of court days that we require in order to clear the backlog, and then our estimates of what the number of months of delay that are before us currently. And as I said, I suspect that number will continue to grow, but we do intend to provide this information to this committee so that you can be well aware of progress. Let's hope that we're going to make in clearing the backlog, and certainly giving some support to our reaching out from an advocacy point of view, seeking some support by the Ministry of the Attorney General in increasing the number of court days that are available to us. Item number 5 is really just an update on traditionally the workload statistics that we bring forward to this committee for the staff working within the Provincial Offences Court Department. Item number 6, a document prepared by the Municipal Finance Officers Association of Ontario on the 2021 federal budget. I certainly felt that this was really quite a good summary document, sort of by program area or area of interest, highlighting certainly the areas that would be of interest to municipalities, but a very good summary. You know, and I just, of course, draw committee's attention to page 65, which is kind of the summary of the financial position that the federal government is presenting to us as their plans for the future. Page 65, you know, indicates that over their current planning horizon, deficits will continue to be a fact of life for Canadians, and we will increase our annual deficits by $725 billion over that planning horizon, and we will take the net federal debt from about $700 billion to $1.5 trillion. So those are some numbers that we've never heard discussed for the country of Canada, certainly in our history. Certainly, I guess, eyebrow-raising numbers, to say the least. Item number 7 really was an update on some direction provided by this committee for us to create sort of an alternative reporting format for council to consider. We brought forward a template last year. Then there was some direction to staff to update that particular template and present again to council, in the 2021 fiscal period with our first quarterly statement. You know, there's certainly some challenges in attempting, from a staffing point of view, attempting to maintain a couple of financial reporting systems. And so we certainly had a good start at it, but we were not able to have that statement available for you today to give you some comparative view of gross versus net budgeting. We do commit to providing that to council in the future, but one of the conditions that I have is that the statements reconcile perfectly before we release them to council. And with all of the additional accounts and systems that we created to manage COVID in 2020, all of those updates could not be balanced in time to release these reports to you today. So we will get them to you, but they're not available for today's meeting. Item number 8, and on an annual basis, the County of Renfrew, just like your own municipality, receives some documentation from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. It is a document that indicates our annual repayment limits. So in other words, we have no capacity to take on any more debt that is contained within that ARL limit document. And so we are regulated or legislated not to exceed those limits. But as I say, I think on an annual basis, the document is presented in a way that might attempt to encourage some municipalities to take on some additional debt. You know, the province is letting us know on page number 1 that we could borrow up to $225 million, and all we have to do is increase our annual municipal levy by $18 million a year, or about 37% increase over what it is now. And we'll have to maintain that for the next 20-year planning period. So, you know, that's great encouragement. And I guess I somewhat wonder if the province, you know, must be using the same financial planners that the federal government is using, taking us from $700 billion in debt to $1.5 trillion. And so that information is there for your information. And you've received that likewise at your own councils. Speaking of debt, item number 9, we are not able to bring forward to you the bylaws associated with some debt that we have carefully planned to enter into to deal with the financing of the Madawaska River Bridge project located within the town of Arnprior. So our budget documentation approved us to consider Infrastructure Ontario as the financing option to finance this rather expensive bridge rehabilitation project. We did have a short-term construction loan that we will convert into a 10-year debenture. The process involved with Infrastructure Ontario is pretty much laid out for us. The steps that we need to follow. We cannot have for you today an actual rate quote because it is only provided 7 days prior to the date where we adopt the bylaw to enter into the debt. And so this item number 9 sort of speaks to the timelines that will happen around our quotes from Infrastructure Ontario on the debt. But they did give to me the current IO rate, if in fact today was within 7 days of our council meeting, and that would be 2.04%. So we could secure $4,684,000 of principal at 2.04%. Biannual payments over the next 10 years. Our annual debt servicing cost would be $520,000, and we would have paid a total of $517,000 in interest over that 10-year period. So I suspect, committee, that when we receive the notification about our rate, it would be very close to that 2.04% number, and that we can expect to see numbers very close to what I'm presenting to you today as estimates. However, the process will require us to call a special meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee just prior to County Council, wherein we will have all of the bylaws that are required to be adopted to enter into this debt at County Council at the end of this month. And Madam Chair, that item number 9 is the end of my report. Thank you.
Oh, you've got an addendum about cannabis.
My apologies, Madam Chair. The addendum report that came to us is item number 10. That was mailed out to you separately, and it has to do with a resolution dealing with the recreational cannabis in Ontario and land use planning. So I'll read out the recommendation to you that the Finance and Administration Committee agree with the Development and Property Committee that funds be used from the Cannabis Reserve Fund to undertake a land use planning study with respect to cannabis cultivation, production, and processing in the county or study area region. And further, that the study include evaluating potential associated impacts on sensitive land uses and recommending an approach for zoning cannabis production facilities, and that the authors of the study consider and report upon any other land use planning considerations as relevant and deemed appropriate. And further, that this project be done in partnership with local municipalities. And so that recommendation came to us from a discussion and presentation that was made at the Development and Property Committee. And so, Madam Chair, I leave that with this committee, and perhaps the Chair of Development and Property or Mr. Kelly might want to speak further to this particular resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll deal with this resolution before I go back to information. Can I come in seconder to get it on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Sweet, second by Warden Robinson. All right, discussion. I think the background that you gave us was very comprehensive and certainly made me understand this resolution a lot better. But I don't see any hands up. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Sweet.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this came up at our DMP meeting, and we had a fairly lengthy discussion with regards to this. I think one of the issues is not, I don't know, Jeff, if you indicated to our committee where the funding might come from for this particular study that we're talking about. Might give you a bit of a comfort level as far as the dollars and cents that are required to do this particular study. It certainly seemed to us that this was much broader than just a local issue in terms of the urban, but very much a rural issue as well because of the land and some of the challenges that are associated with this. So if I could ask Jeff to maybe explain where funding for this might come from, we might have a better comfort level of where we're going with this initiative. And then perhaps Craig might want to jump in and say a few words about this as well.
Excellent. Jeff, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair. So Alf, over the last number of years, the County of Renfrew has been in receipt of some provincial funding specifically to deal with our efforts to manage, the new legislation allowing for cannabis production, cultivation, sale within Ontario municipalities. We received 3 payments prior to 2021 that totaled $156,000. Direction from County Council on the use of those funds was to transfer them into a new reserve, and it's actually called a Cannabis Reserve Fund, and to hold those funds until Council decided on the appropriate use of that money. The funds came as restricted funds. We could not take the Cannabis Reserve and use it for other purposes that were not in accordance with the agreement that was signed to receive the money in the first place. So they couldn't be used to help us, pay for the Madawaska River Bridge or other projects or that we have before us. So they must be used for the management of the legislation allowing cannabis production and sales in our communities. So in addition to the 156 that we had before us to the end of 2020, in 2021, we received the balance of funds payment from the provincial government of about $13,800, almost $14,000. So in total, we now hold $170,000 in the Cannabis Reserve Fund. And I suspect that Mr. Kelly will want to speak further to this. The proposal before you is for a planning study. We would go through an RFP process to select a organization to conduct the study, but we certainly have no plans to be using the entirety of the $170,000 available to us. And so perhaps, Madam Chair, with your agreement, I might ask my colleague, Mr. Kelly, to speak a little bit more about the study itself.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jeff, and through you. So what was described to Development and Property was that a number of municipalities have already passed interim control bylaws to deal with cannabis greenhouses, I guess, for the sake of a better term, those who are producing large-scale cannabis facilities, I guess, in their municipalities, and they are unprepared to deal with it in their own zoning bylaws. So they have passed interim control bylaws and have a year to complete a study and then implement those zoning bylaw changes. So we are in a bit of a ticking clock. I think the first interim control bylaw comes due around September of this year, and then a few others in the ensuing months after that. So we have reached out on behalf of those municipalities who, when Mr. Cheeseman was the manager, at one point we may have had capacity to complete these studies. That has since changed with the retirement and the amount of planning work that is ongoing. So we've reached out to a few consultants who we are aware deal with these type of planning studies for cannabis production facilities, who can complete the study in due course. We're talking in the neighborhood of $50,000, we believe, with a properly executed RFP. And that would be a document shared amongst all municipalities who wish to move forward in their own zoning bylaws to implement these changes in their municipality. So we are thankful for the Cannabis Fund, and this won't affect our budget this year in terms of a levy budget, but does create a document that can be shared amongst all 17 municipalities and then fit within our strategic goals moving forward to provide that leadership to those municipalities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Anything further on the addendum? Councillor Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor Sweden and Mr. Kelly. We are one of the 3 municipalities that have an ICBL right now, an interim control bylaw. I'm not sure where in the calendar our particular initiative is. It is in October. It will be a year. I am certainly in support of this. I am dismayed that it is only now being addressed. I recognize the departure of Mr. Cheeseman, but our municipality had been in conversation with the planning department, I think going back to October, November of 2020, and have had no response right up until this initiative now. The challenge for us, as I understand, it's been indicated that the timeline here is unlikely to meet the timeline of when our first year would expire. For those who may not be familiar with the interim control bylaw process, it is renewable for a year, but the renewal is subject to appeal. So the timeline is critical for us. So we have now unfortunately begun investigations of hiring expert consultants as well, which is going to be a duplication of effort. But I think that the engagement of outside experts probably was something that the county could have considered prior to the 5th month of the year. So disappointed that it is only happening now, but perhaps Mr. Kelly can shed some light on when the delivery of the investigations and report would be anticipated to be received.
Through you, Chair, and to Councillor Donahue. So to address it as best we can, we are a product of our own process, I suppose. We are obviously aware of your municipality as we are of the other 2, have been tried to be in contact with us, and then we had reached out to consultants to get a scope and try to assist. I was made aware that this fund could be applicable, and then we thought we'd reach out to a broader scope of municipalities and try to make it a document suitable for all. When you find things out on the day after a committee, and then you have to go to May and then to the end of May for county council approval to use this fund, again, it delays the process for us. It's not something that we wanted either, and did think that the scope of the project, based on what we've learned and what we've found from other documents and other municipalities, is actually quite broad. And on top of all those things, our official plan is now being changed, and you can't ask a consultant to review a document that's going to be changed in a month either. So all these dominoes were collapsing on us, and now I think we're at a good position with those changes coming in the middle of May, at the end of May, for the official plan. We can actually ask them to review our redrafted official plan now that it's basically county council, not adopted or approved, but it has county council endorsement to move forward. So that said, we are anxious for county council approval on this recommendation at the end of the month. The RFP is in draft form. We will launch that immediately with a 2 or 3 week turnaround, and hopefully be able to award that by the end of June and have them working right away on development, and make them aware of particularly Amundsen Bromley's timeline, and try to get that one out first, I guess, and try to get that information back to you in time that you can not have an appealable zoning bylaw as per the definition of the Planning Act.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Donahue.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you to Mr. Kelly for certainly elucidating on the point. I believe, and certainly when this comes to County Council, I anticipate we're here. It's my understanding that Brunel, Lindau, Raglan, and Madawaska Valley, I believe, are the other municipalities. If I am correct, and I am often not, so I am subject to correction, but I think that perhaps BLR is the first of the initial year interim control bylaw that will meet its 1 year conclusion, and I think it's much sooner than ours. I have certainly said my piece with respect to disappointment at the delay. What I will say is I certainly recognize that cannabis is now a legal product in the country of Canada. and that there is an industry surrounding cannabis. The unfortunate thing, and I'm fairly certain committee will be aware, there's hardly a month goes by the press doesn't have a story about a putative above board or legal cannabis production facility that turns out then to have been more akin to a Wild West approach. So I think that environment is out there, in addition to the well-established cannabis production that we are also aware of, but it is certainly the former that has given us pause in Admas to Bromley. And ensuring that something that seems, utilizing a word that seems to be in vogue, low rules, Health Canada seems somewhat unhelpful in specific definitions and leaving it to us with our zoning bylaws, hence the challenge that we've had in trying to accommodate this legal industry. So just as background, I certainly recognize the pressures of the economic component to cannabis production. So I'm certainly looking forward to the results of this study, and the sooner, the better.
Thank you for that. Councillor Doncaster. Councillor Doncaster, you're not on mute, but we can't hear you. Glenn, did he log off? Okay,
Madam Chair, can we reconsider the virtual meetings resolution?
I'm going to give Glenn a minute to log back on so that he can get his hand up. Actually, my internet's going wonky.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
And do I still have the floor?
Yeah, we were waiting on you.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologize for
Yeah,
that.
I didn't want to go ahead until you logged back on because you had your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I had no level on my mic whatsoever. Some of my concerns have been explained through the previous conversation, and I would say I would agree with Councillor Donoghue. I mean, this is a legal activity, business, industry in this country at this point in time. I don't know that we have to create planning and zoning issues around if I wanted to start growing corn, or if I wanted to make a greenhouse to grow flowers. And having said that, regulated by Health Canada. Now, Councillor Donoghue has pointed out that potentially Health Canada is not that, hasn't been that helpful. But there certainly are regulations. So I'm a little concerned that, you know, we're going down this road. However, and I'd also point out that every municipality that did not restrict the I forget what it was, but the permitted sale in the municipalities, all municipalities received funding that would help mitigate increased costs due to the legalization of cannabis in this country. So each of us has funds that we could be using to have a look at issues, local issues that come up. If this was taxpayers' dollars, I would not be supporting it. But because the county does have the cannabis reserve, and I would hate to see somebody from Europe look at the county books and see that we have a cannabis reserve and question why does the county have a cannabis reserve? But anyway, I won't go there. But if we didn't have that reserve, I certainly wouldn't be supporting this. You know, I think that there is some responsibility, but if the resulting report is available to all municipalities in the county of Renfrew, then I guess there's an advantage to having the county do this once as opposed to 17 of us doing it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now I'm really glad I waited for you to come back on. That's sort of the road I was going down. Like, you know, there's so many of these things that we do in silos, the 17 of us, and to have this done once for all of us makes total sense. Paul, did you have your hand up? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to Councillor Donohue's comments earlier on. We've just been getting our feedback on the ground with respect to the planning department. So, I appreciate the comments with respect to the delay. But from putting my planning hat back on, I'm not sure I completely understand about the concern with respect to renewing the interim control bylaw. I mean, renewal, I would suspect, of that bylaw for an additional year. I don't think you would get a lot of appeals on it, knowing that we're doing a study and there's a process in place. So I question the issue with renewing it, knowing that there's an opportunity here to utilize that funding for that purpose. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donohue.
I would acknowledge, Madam Chair, I cannot ascertain what the odds would be of an appeal. Certainly on the passing of an interim control bylaw, it is the absolute discretion of the municipality. The renewal is not so, and that we do have, or we are aware, at least in the ether, if you will, of proponents. From that perspective, I don't think it is unreasonable to anticipate that there might be a challenge. And all I'm going from that is, upon a challenge, it will then require a response. That is the issue that we are facing. Just while I have the floor, just to perhaps illuminate some of the intricacies of the conversation, and Councillor Doncaster has raised points that were certainly raised at our table. We are an agricultural community. And the province of Ontario has deemed this an agricultural crop. However, I would say that corn, soybeans, alfalfa, none of these require a fence that is more appropriate at a federal penitentiary, nor high-powered security lights surrounding it. So it is not precisely the same as another agricultural crop. There is nothing else that I grow that requires security, perimeter fencing. These are some of the questions that are surrounding it. With respect to MDS, I believe that was in this report, certainly as it relates to the production of manure on livestock farming. MDS is a formula. As I understand, there are certainly times of the year, depending on this is with respect to outdoor production, there are times of the year where there is a particular aroma, if you will, that comes from the maturing plants. If this is perhaps on an indoor operation, that might be year-round. These are considerations that I'm unaware of, that we do not have certainty on, but that I think are certainly worthy of having an investigation because of land use conflict. So very pleased that the initiative is being undertaken, but I think that if the discussion has not happened at any one of your tables, these are the points. Intuitively, yes, I was of the same mind as Councillor Doncaster. Well, if it's an agricultural product, but it is substantially different from any other agricultural product that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Anything further on the addendum? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. And we will go back to information item number 1, council remuneration. Item number 2, the treasurer's report. Councillor Donohue.
Just a single question. I apologize, Madam Chair. I wasn't able to go to it. It was with respect to forestry. There's substantial more revenues have been received than anticipated. I'm wondering if that is simply because of more accelerated harvesting, removal, and payment, or if in fact we are realizing on more value that has been harvested.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, we just had one of our plantations thinned, and the price of these trees has increased exponentially over COVID. But I will turn this over to Craig.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm sure Jeff is watching the bills as well. I believe that the increase was, it's last year's tender results are being paid for in this year. So we had a large tract that was awarded last year, and I believe the revenues are now being realized in the first quarter of this year because they had a long cut period, and that's when they're paying us. I believe that's the case on this one, Jeff. If you want to just clarify for me, I believe that's true.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I think that's certainly part of it. And I believe there was a forestry report that came through to Development and Property Committee that indicated that there's an expectation in 2021 that we will exceed our targeted forestry revenues, budgeted at $180,000, that we will exceed that level for the 2021 period. So there's kind of a two-pronged response to that question. One is there was some early first quarter activities taking place, and we realized those revenues, but we expect that situation to continue through 2021. And I believe we are expecting that we will exceed our $180,000 target. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on the, Councillor Donahue.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Madam Chair, through you to both Mr. Kelly and to Mr. Foss. And the reason I raise this is it has become a meme now, certainly well known to everyone, of the cost of building materials and how it has exploded. And I am curious, being in agriculture, I've become unfortunately accustomed to the fact that food prices might go through the roof, and yet I am still walking around with holes in my rubber boots. They are oftentimes the finished product, the consumer good, is divorced from the primary good. So I'm kind of curious whether the incredible increase, 200% to 300% increases in some building materials, whether that's been translating into the raw materials growing in the forests.
Chair, I can attempt to hit this one a little bit. So we tender our blocks, obviously. Through the forest management plan, we identify which blocks are to be cut each year, and that's tendered, and we award it obviously to the highest paying customer. I think the result, if we did it today, might be different, and depending on the species that we're harvesting as well. I think what you're seeing is the pine, the white pine, the framing lumber is people are likely to have been paid or be paying a higher amount for that if we were to cut that. I can't recall all the species that we cut this year. Poplar, still there isn't a big market for poplar yet this year because it's a low, get the term, it's a species not as in demand as spruce pine fir for framing, or otherwise, or red pine for that matter for pressure treating. But it has been noted, we are looking at our white pine tracts, and we're actually busy marking that for tendering later this year, and we'll look at that as it goes. We have been in conversation, just by the by, with mills. Obviously, we deal with all sectors, but the mills are happy that it's their time after several decades of being at the bottom of the food chain in terms of high revenue. So they're happy that the market demand is there, and they will continue to cut in a sustainable fashion. Not everything that you see being cut around the area is being sustainable, but they are cutting in sustainable fashion and are happy that the demand is there to keep their mill workers employed on several shifts now, and watching their time happen, and actually are seeing that this demand and these prices will likely continue for the better part of this year, not into this year or not into next year dropping at all. So they're happy for that success, but it comes at a cost to the retailer, obviously.
Thank you for that. Supplementary, Councillor Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to close off, thank you. That was a very robust answer to Mr. Kelly. I do appreciate that. And certainly one of the I don't know whether it's an ancillary benefit or whether it is one of the commitments of the County of Renfrew, but I think that the County of Renfrew, that is the corporation of the County of Renfrew, is immersed in the forest industry by dint of having the forestry department. I think that makes us aware of all of the dynamics that are surrounding this resource industry, but it is, I think, worth noting, I likewise, or agriculture is within that resource industry. But it is important to understand the various roles, the various stakeholders or sectors even within that industry, and the fact that a consumer good may be soaring in price may still leave the primary product at substantially deflated relative to the consumer price. The only advantage, and I will certainly attest to the fact that there are trees growing on properties of mine, the difference between agriculture and forestry is I don't have to feed my trees when the prices are low.
Good points. Anything further on the treasurer's report? Then I will move on to corporate services, the key performance indicators. We'll go through these one by one. A, the finance department. B, human resources. C, IT. I did have one question. I see Chris has joined us. Chris, have you seen an uptake in people trying to hack our system? There was a report, I think it was through the CBC a couple of days ago, that apparently because so many things are virtual now, there's been a rise in hackers.
Thank you, Chair. We really haven't noticed anything yet. The stats that we keep on our mail system are pretty consistent for the amount of mail that we're allowing in and we're blocking. But we usually do see an increase in, email messages that we're blocking and that sort of stuff in the September to about December time range. And it's always been like that for the years. And the only thing we really could equate it to was that was in the kind of the Christmas season when everybody's doing online shopping and all that sort of stuff. We really haven't noticed anything really out of the ordinary.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Nice to see you, by the way. Anything further on IT? Seeing none. POA. All right. Number 4, the POA backlog. Ridiculous. Number 5, the POA workload. Number 6, the MFO. Councillor Doncaster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just a bit of information. I started looking at this when we were talking about vaccine rollouts, and somebody had rolled out 1 million vaccines, and bear with me for a second here, 1 million vaccines, and then we were talking about the country of India needs 1.3 billion, and what's the difference? And then I remember once I did that, and I was reading this report from Mr. Foss around the federal budget and the deficit getting to pick a number, $1 trillion. So like what do those numbers mean? So it's easy to find. So 1 million is the equivalent in seconds of 12 days. So 1 million seconds is 12 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years. That's the scope of the difference. We can all sit around and understand what 1 million is. I think most of us know what 1 million is, but when you get to 1 trillion and you go from 12 days to the equivalent in seconds to the equivalent of over 31 years, 31,000 years, like it's astronomical, the difference. But anyway, it was just something that came to mind when I was looking at those numbers. Thanks.
I dig the way your mind thinks. It's it was very disturbing to read that report, and I agree with you, Glenn. I don't have a handle on what $1 trillion is. Councillor Bros.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just going through that report, it certainly is a very comprehensive, detailed report. Just, I did notice there was a number of funds that the government has made available to try and improve and increase the housing stock, especially when it comes to assisted or rent subsidy housing. So that's something I'm sure the county and staff will be looking into to see if any of those funds or programs could be utilized in the county.
Good point.
That's
Any
just
further on 6? And we'll move on to 7, gross budget versus net budget. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Jeff, I guess. In December, Chair Murphy and myself had a meeting at Eganville with Mr. Foss regarding the gross budget and the net budget format. And at that point, we expressed some concern with the documents that were presented pre-budget and on the gross and net format, that there was, and it's our impression that there's a lot of cleanup needed. And that was the reason that I made the motion that we not move forward with it for budgeting and relook at it. So when we met with Jeff in Eganville, in order to maybe substantially reduce the work, the suggestion was made that we look at one department that the numbers seem to work for, and that was property and development, and that we bring a report to council instead of the complete package on the property and development, and let council look at it and see if there's an appetite for this at all. And if there is no appetite, well, let's throw it to the side and move on. This thing has been going on for a very long time, and I don't want to see the county staff, including Jeff, putting all this work into it if there's not an appetite. So Chair Murphy and myself at that point suggested that why don't we look at property and development, get it in a format that we are happy with, we be in the committee, and then bring that one forward instead of a complete package that's going to take exponentially more work. So I do appreciate that when we had the meeting that day, that Jeff was under stress from personal matters. But when I see this coming, I was hoping that he as the director would bring, maybe a motion forward or something forward that perhaps we would look at that. I left the meeting with the impression that our suggestion was received fine, but when I see this and the staff have to do all this work, I just wonder if we shouldn't revisit the recommendation that we, the committee, made at that meeting in Eganville. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Brian. So, yeah, Jeff, maybe if we could just ask you to do one department. I totally agree with Brian and I recognize that meeting was cut short and, there were some issues. So yeah, I think we did decide on development and property. I think Brian's right. Councillor Peckett.
Thank you, Chair. I know, I believe Mr. Foss meets with the treasurers from all over the county. I don't know how many times a year, but I'm wondering if Mr. Foss had brought this up to our own treasurers in one of those meetings, because I asked my treasurer about it, and she said in no way did she want to move to gross budgeting as opposed to net. budgeting. So that's just my treasure, but I'm wondering if any of the other treasurers throughout the county have had similar comments. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I haven't actually asked my treasurer. Jeff, did you bring it up with your,
Thank you, Chair. And in response to the comments from Councillor Peckett, we've recently actually held a number of meetings with our local treasurers. All of that discussion dealt with tax policy and the recommendations and the bylaws that came forward in April for tax policy. We did also, in addition, hold a Renfrew County Clerks and Treasurers Association meeting that dealt with a number of other things that were common to all municipalities, specifically asset management planning and Ontario Reg 588-17 and all the new things that we have to begin to do to track pavement condition and bridge condition indexes, etc. We never raised the issue of moving to a different sort of format or style of financial reporting because it's really not prescriptive. The Act doesn't tell each municipality how to move forward with this. It does have requirements around the Public Sector Accounting Board so that council is fully aware of understanding the differences between perhaps your own internal municipal format and what is the requirement for your audited financial statements. And for us, what we've done is we've created a kind of a hybrid statement, which provides sort of a municipal surplus that we set a budget on, but it also highlights for council and committees all of the items that have to be reconciled in order to get to the audited PSAB format. So the statements that you will see presented from our auditors in June will tie in exactly to the surpluses that we present in our internal draft financial statements. So certainly the request from the chair and from Councillor Hunt to use a particular department, we got very close is all I can say, but when we were preparing for today's meeting, we weren't able to reconcile and feel confident that we've picked up all of the accounts even for this one group of departments reporting up and through in development and property, but it won't take us a lot more time in order to present that as an example. Certainly will take us a lot more time to do all of the other departments and update all those other statements, but we will, in short order, hopefully for the next committee meeting, be able to present this gross budget format for this committee. My apologies, but some of our other projects on our table have sort of taken up a lot of our time and pulled us away from completing this project. But no doubt that we'll be prepared to do this in the very near future.
thank you for that. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Mr. Foss, then am I hearing that you will be presenting just the one department, not the complete?
Yeah. Thank you. And through you, Chair. The group of departments, I guess, that report up through to development and property. So planning, economic development, and GIS, and forestry, and all the property departments that report up through to development and property. I think that would be a sample that Councillor or Chair Murphy and Councillor Hunt had asked us to sort of focus on, and so that would be what we try and bring forward as an example of the style, I guess, that's being recommended. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Hunt, supplementary.
Yes, thank you. And a question for Mr. Peckett. Are you suggesting that the Township of McNabb uses net budgeting and not gross budgeting? Because I didn't know there was any municipality that did that.
We use the same as what the county has been doing for years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further on this item? Councillor Peckett.
Thank you. Hearing that there is a lot of work for Jeff and his committee to move forward with this. My suggestion would be is to poll the treasurers in all the municipalities and get an answer back from them. If the majority of them are not in favor, then the work doesn't need to be done. But if the majority are in favor, then we can proceed with Jeff doing all that work. Thank you.
But I don't think that we were thinking that it would go to the lower tiers. What Brian and I were, and I'm getting the head bob from Brian, we were just thinking in terms of the county departments. So I think if we leave Jeff and his department to their devices and let them do development of property, bring it forward. Let's see if there's an appetite for it. If there isn't, then we won't go forward. And if there is, then the work can be done over time. Councillor Peckett, supplementary.
Thank you. I understand that. I'm just trying to avoid a lot of work for Jeff's group because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, maybe I'm way out in left field here, but does it not work better for the county if all the municipalities use the same format as the county does?
Jeff, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I guess to Councillor Packett's question, really it's the format that is presented at each municipality can be somewhat customized to your own needs and wishes and practices in your own municipality. You do have requirements under the Act to produce financial statements that year-end financial statements, audited statements that fulfill a particular set of rules. And so your external auditors, if you're not doing it internally, will require that format before they sign off on the financial statements. But internally, on a monthly basis, you really can customize them as you wish. Here at the County of Renfrew, we use what we've termed as being a net budget approach, which is essentially what is the municipal cost, the municipal levy that is needed in each department to support that department's activities. And so we look at costs, expenses, we look at all the other revenues, and the shortfall, if you will, the deficit is covered through the municipal tax levy. And so that is our approach is kind of for the financial statements that are before you in the package today, the net budget is really the dollars that are required, the municipal county levy dollars that are required to support each budget, each department, each activity in our organization. I think if we go back in time on this issue, one of the challenges that we have as a finance department, which might be very different from your own local municipality, is we are not sent provincial and federal subsidies for our programs. We have to calculate it. And we record those provincial and federal subsidies as a calculated number after we understand all of our expenses, less all of the revenue sources, including provincial and federal subsidy amounts. The net difference is really the net municipal cost. And that, of course, has to be recalculated on our cost sharing basis with the city of Pembroke. So for us, from a practical point of view, we've elected to go with our current process, which is a net budgeting format, which really facilitates those calculations that we need to do to understand our cost, what portion is paid for by the senior levels of government, whether it's 100% funded or 75-25 or 50-50, and then the resulting net cost then has to be split with the city of Pembroke. So that's been our practice for many, many years. That's kind of how internally we organize ourselves. The presentation that's being requested from the chair and from Councillor Hunt is to look at it more traditionally and have all of our revenues sort of at the top of the financial statement, the expenses, underneath, and the net surplus or deficit being reported below that. And of course, that surplus or deficit has to be financed somewhere. And so that, of course, gets back to being a net municipal levy cost. So it's just it's a presentation format issue that is being requested of us, but that's certainly not how we organize ourselves or how we internally calculate. I think previously I brought forward, we have about 150 provincial revenue accounts across the organization. Those are calculated accounts. I can't simply report that as revenue. I must calculate what is the subsidy that I'm entitled to based on the program guidelines for each one of our departments across the organization. And so that's primarily why we use the approach that we do, is we have to calculate what those subsidies are. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, this is just an information item. The resolution was passed last year, and I think that this was the will of County Council to see a different approach. So I would just leave it at that it is an information item. Councillor Sweet.
Yeah, very briefly, Chair, through you, to maybe even Paul or to Craig. I don't disagree that there's perhaps if there's a better way of doing it, or a more efficient way of doing it, or information that's easier and to understand, fine. And I understand cutting it back down a little bit in terms of just using one department. I get that. This is the first time that I've heard that the Development of Property Committee is going to be the one that's going to be chosen. I guess that's up to the CEO and Jeff at this point in time, but just so that I understand, as chair of the Development of Property Committee, is it my understanding then is the will of this group to go forward and have the Development of Property Committee be used as a pilot project, shall we say, for this particular process? Is that my understanding of this?
Oh, I was going to answer, but go ahead, Councillor Hunt.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
So yeah, for lack of a better term, you would be the guinea pigs, but it would flow through to County Council so that everybody would see it.
Yeah.
But we just thought, because DNP has so many faculties in it, it might be the one to start with so that people understand how it would look going forward. Yeah, Councillor Hunt, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. But I don't really think we would implement it into the department. It was just so that we had an example using the department that councillors could look at and say, is this even a format that we want to go to? And then if it's yes, we'd have to do all the other departments and move it forward. But it's just to take a smaller subsection and say, do we even want to do this? And if we don't, I'm fine with that. So I don't think we would use the department so much as a guinea pig. It was just picking one department to lighten the load of Jeff's workload of Jeff's staff.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point in doing every department if this isn't the will of County Council.
Right.
Go ahead, Councillor Sweet.
I understand. I just wanted clarity. The Development of Property was to use the guinea pig. I'm not so necessarily comfortable with guinea pig type thing, but that's okay. I get it. I understand that. I understand, we get 10 departments or 5 departments or whatever, and we want it. And yeah, the diversity of development of property. The point I was trying to make is this is the first time I've heard that DNP would be chosen for that. I understand it's not going to be etched in stone. It's going to be, this is how we do it now. This is how we could do it in the future. And it's going to be spread across possibly the entire municipality. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that DNP was the one that's going to be used for this particular process, this guinea pig process. Okay.
We like to pick on you, Bob. Sorry, Brian, I probably should have had a chat with you. All right, is there anything further on 7? Councillor Donahue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I understand, I'm presuming that this doesn't mean anything to the D&P committee, that's simply a report that would come forward from the corporate services would side by side report. In one way, it would be on a gross budgeting perspective, on the other would be a net budgeting perspective, but I'm presuming that the D&P committee and the D&P departments are probably going to be unaware of this, that it is simply that illustration that's going to come out of the corporate services department. Is that correct?
You are correct, sir.
Thank you.
Because we just decided, Brian and I sort of just thought that DNP was the appropriate one because it has so many faculties. All right, is there anything further on 7? We're dropping like flies here, guys, and we've got 2 closed sessions. Anything on number 8? Number 9, the Madawaska River Bridge. All right, the report as a whole. All right, can I get a mover and seconder to approve Jeff's report? Moved by Councillor Donahue, second by Councillor Hunt. Anything further? All in favor? All right. Is there any new business? I see none. So I'm going to put it out to the group. Actually, maybe first of all, I'll ask Paul, how long do you think this closed meeting will be, Paul?
I believe actually most of the members of committee have heard one of the 2 parts. Should be very short, actually. Should be, well, actually, I think it's going to be 15 to 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. As long as it's not going to be an hour, just because if people want to have lunch.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we can wrap this up before 1 o'clock, that's decent.
Okay.
Okay. So then I would entertain a motion to go into closed to discuss personal matters about an identifiable individual, including employees, and labor relation or employee negotiations. Moved by Councillor Sweet, seconded by Councillor Bros. All in favor? All right, we are now in closed. Thank you. Welcome back. All right, the date of our next meeting is Thursday, June 17th, 2021. And I will ask for a mover and seconder to adjourn this meeting. Moved by Councillor Donahue, seconded by Councillor Hunt. Anything further? All in favor? We are adjourned.